Just over a decade ago, on a windy day in late spring, I sat at my desk where I worked from home. I heard the joyful stomp of teenaged feet coming up the back stairs and into the kitchen. I heard the telephone yanked from the wall. My son, breathless, said, "Hello, 911, I need to report a grass fire at..." He gave our address, said, "Okay, hurry," and hung up. Then the sound of pounding tennis shoes disappeared out the door again. Fire! My heart leapt into my throat. My husband and I were in the middle of a divorce I didn't want, mostly because I could not envision surviving life as a single parent. Now a fire? I jumped to my feet. My kids were off from school that day, and they'd invited friends over for a bonfire, which I banned them from lighting because of the high winds. We lived in a rented, drafty old farmhouse on a property with another house behind ours that sat right next to two barns, old barns. That neighbor and I always worried about campfire sparks and lightning strikes because if either barn went up, our houses would be gone too. When I ran out the back door, I saw a bunch of terrified kid faces smeared with soot. They looked like chimney sweeps out of the movie Mary Poppins. Behind our two barns loomed an ominous cloud of smoke, reaching so high it blocked out the sky. At the side of the house, the faucet spigot was on full throttle. The kids filled tiny pails and large tubs with water, but they filled the plastic tubs so full they couldn't carry them. I yelled, "How close is the fire to the barn?" "Close," my son screeched. In as calm a voice as I could muster, I told him, "Go upstairs and bring down every blanket." I instructed the kids to drench the blankets in tubs of water and bring the wet blankets to me behind the barn. As I ran up behind the barns, I prayed, "Please don't let the barns burn. Please don't let the barns burn." Thankfully, the wind was spreading the fire away from us, out into empty fields, but there were flames licking at the foot of each barn, close enough to reach out and grab hold of that 100-year-old wood. I cried out, "Forget about the field. Save the barns. Only worry about the barns." We got a system going. Half the kids did the blanket dipping and the blanket delivery, and the rest of us smothered the flames and sent the steaming blankets back for a rinse and repeat cycle. "Mom, the fire is spreading." My son, with tears streaking his soot, pointed to the field. I feared the fire would burn up the entire countryside, all 4 miles between us and town, but I couldn't let him see how scared I was. I said, "Don't worry about that, the firemen will. Only worry about the barns." Long minutes later, we heard the wail of sirens. "How did this start?" I yelled to my son. He shouted back, "It was only a bottle rocket." Of course, those good kids obeyed my instructions to the letter. They didn't start a campfire. But why had I not anticipated they'd be crazy enough to light burning pieces of tinder and fire them up into the sky in this wind? A fire truck with a deafening sound roared up the narrow gravel path, siren blaring. A phalanx of volunteer firefighters hopped out, garbed in full gear for fighting a forest fire. Big boots, heavy rubber coats, heavy gloves. I expected them to unwrap the fire hose on the big red truck. Instead, they armed themselves with brooms. Yes, brooms, like my grandmother used to sweep the kitchen floor. And I was astounded at how effective the brooms were at snuffing out the flames. And to extinguish the fire that went out into the fields and the tree line, they only needed one smaller truck, armed with a water tank. When the fire was under control, the fire chief took the kids aside. He spoke quietly and calmly as he collected their names. He asked each one to tell him individually what had happened. And he reported back to me that he knew it wasn't intentional, that it was just kids being kids. I nearly fainted with relief. that neither the kids nor I would be issued a fine. He said, "The kids were honest. They all admitted blame. They learned a good lesson. This is our 10th brush fire in 5 days. It's really dry, and this wind makes perfect conditions for this stuff to spread after starting." And then he gave a compliment. "The kids did a great job protecting those barns. Great job." I looked at the blackened grass next to the barns, closed my eyes, and drew in a deep breath. After the fire trucks were gone, I joined the kids who were all seated around the still empty campfire ring. Unnecessarily, I told them how lucky they'd all been, and I made them promise they'd tell their parents what had happened. And then I went back to the house and sat down at my desk, shaking, and I lost it. I bawled with relief that we hadn't burned up the entire township, and I sobbed in fear. How would I survive as a single parent if stuff like this was going to happen? That smoky feeling of self-doubt followed me around for weeks, until a day when I made a joke to my son about me being a lousy parent. He said, "Are you kidding? When that fire happened, my friend said, 'Man, your mom didn't freak out at all.' My friends think you are the coolest mom ever." I was speechless, and my son hugged me. And that was the moment that I realized I am doing this. We will survive. Thank you.